So, welcome everyone. Tonight we're going to talk about growing aerial roots on your ficus or your schefflera, any plant that grows aerial roots. So, this is my ficus that is from a seed, and if you look down at the base of it, you can see all the aerial roots that are growing this year. I did get some comments on YouTube that after I repotted this tree, it looked too plain, the trunk, so I don't think that'll be a problem in future. It'll be quite decorative with the aerial roots. So, there's a lot of stuff on the internet of how to grow aerial roots. Someone will post something, this is how I grew my aerial roots. Another person will try the same thing, same methods, and it doesn't work. And there's kind of been no real information on it. So I've been doing a lot of research on it and a lot of experimentation, and I think I have the answer. And I think it'll work for everyone. So I'm going to go to the whiteboard now. And we'll start off with some of the common techniques, I guess. Or we can call them myths, maybe. One is your tree has to be root bound. Two, your tree has to be old. Three, you have to have a greenhouse. Four, you have to be lucky, I guess. So these are some of the common things that people will tell you. If you're going to grow aerial roots, you kind of have to have these conditions. I'd say 5 is you have to mist your tree. Mist your tree. So they're all valid. But it doesn't explain why it works. And there's no real technique to it using these rules. So we'll look at them. Let me erase that now. So to grow aerial roots, the number one step is you have to set up your tree. And this means you have to get your tree in a state where it wants to grow aerial roots. And it's kind of weird thinking of a tree that wants to grow aerial roots, but you want to set your tree up so it's in the condition where it will grow aerial roots. If I have a tree in a pot like this, and I have this little tree here with a few branches, it doesn't matter, here's my soil level, it doesn't matter how hard I try on this tree, I'm probably never going to grow aerial roots on it. And the reason is that here's my roots in the soil. And it doesn't matter how much, if you water this tree, the roots are just going to keep growing into the soil. They're going to search for moisture, and they'll be quite happy. When a tree wants to grow aerial roots, you need the tree in a condition where, if you have it in a shallow pot, and you have all kinds of roots in the pot, so this goes back to the pot bound idea. And you water your tree in the morning, thoroughly soak it. By mid-afternoon, if the tree's in full sun or in a greenhouse, all this water in the pot will be used by the tree. And it'll grow more leaves. And your pot will go dry by mid-afternoon. And that's what you want. You want your tree to have enough soil in the pot to stay healthy, but it has to dry out by mid-afternoon. Because mid-afternoon's when the roots start. And if you watch your trees, you'll see this. So there's two things. You have to have enough foliage on the tree. Well, let's say that's one, so foliage. So you have to have enough foliage on the tree to use all the water in the pot by mid-afternoon. If you have a tree that has 3 leaves on it, you water the pot in the morning, it's not going to dry the water out by mid-afternoon. There's just no way. So you have to have lots of foliage. That's one condition you need to set up your tree to grow aerial roots. The second is you have to have porous soil. So any bonsai soil is made up of small particles. And when you water the tree, it fills all the air spaces between the soil particles with water. And then the tree uses that water and it dries out. If you have too fine of particles, you're going to get too much water in the soil, not enough surface area. The roots can't grow between all these fine particles and it won't dry out properly. So you need fairly big particle size, lots of airspace between it. So you water your tree in the morning, and by mid-afternoon, the roots, which are all growing in these spaces, supply your leaves with water and it dries out. So let's say bonsai soil. So that's another condition you need, is you need to have it growing in bonsai soil. The third condition is your roots. You need enough roots that are growing evenly throughout the pot to dry it out. So if we go back to this example, if we have just a few roots growing in here, all this part of the soil is going to stay moist and the roots are going to grow towards it. And it's not going to dry the whole pot out evenly. So we need lots of feeder roots. Lots of feeder roots. And you want them to fill the pot. So there's the third thing is your environment then. For you want the tree in full sun. And you want enough humidity in the air so when these roots do grow out, they don't just dry up. So you need humidity. And heat goes with that. And I'll show you a graph. I was if you look at moisture levels in the air, we draw a graph here. This is temperature at the bottom, going this way. and this is water going up this way. So a typical graph, if we start at 0 freezing, this is in Celsius, and we're going to go up to, let's go up to 60, which is really hot. A graph typically looks like this. It starts off going very shallow, and then it takes off like this. So the higher the temperature, it starts being able to carry more and more humidity in the air. And the magic starts happening around, if you look at the graph, right around 30, and it goes quite dramatically high around 45 degrees. That's not a very good five. That's when you start to see big increases in the amount of moisture that the air can carry. And it's quite dramatic. At 30, if you've got 1 liter in the air. At 45, it can carry about 10 liters. So you can see it's quite a big difference how much moisture in that short temperature range, how much moisture the air can hold. And above that, it just skyrockets. But anything above that, you're probably going to kill your tree. So we're not going to worry about above 45. And 45 degrees is kind of a magic number that you don't want to exceed in temperature. If you go above 45 degrees, you may kill your tree. It's getting up to the kind of risky point. It can take higher than 45 degrees if you're misting your tree and you keep it kind of watered a bit more, but it gets pretty risky about that. So ideally, I would say you want to keep your trees at about 30 to 40 degrees Celsius. And you'll get a lot of humidity in the air. So that comes back to our full sun, heat, and humidity. You need the full sun to dry out the pot, and you need the heat and humidity to grow your aerial roots. So we'll erase that. So the aerial roots, this is the trunk of our tree. I was talking about age of the tree. What factor does the age of your tree have on growing aerial roots? Well, when a tree's young, you have your branch, and you have a thin layer of bark on it, or cambium layer. Cambium layer is very thin on a young tree. As a tree gets older, the bark gets, the cambium layer gets thicker. And you can notice it when you water your tree, that the thinner branches will dry out. The bark will stay wet for a while, and then it'll start drying out. So on the thin branches, it'll dry out the quickest. And on your thicker, older parts of the tree, the bark will stay moist longer, which is what you want. You want that moisture on the bark. So that's a reason an older tree, it's easier to grow aerial roots than a younger one. It's just that it stays moist on the surface longer. So if you imagine then your roots at the bottom are drying out, there's no more moisture in the pot. The tree's got all this foliage. It's mid-afternoon, full sun, it's hot. It says, I want more water. It's searching for water. And because there's all this moisture in the air, it doesn't know if it's in the ground. It doesn't care where it gets it from, so it's gonna start to form bumps here. And because of the moisture, they're going to start growing all over your trunk. And eventually, they'll look like this. They'll just grow kind of straight out into the air. You know, the weight of gravity will pull them down a little bit, but not a whole lot. So, some people have used straws to guide them, and it's kind of, I don't know, I don't like using straws because it's a little risky putting the straw over top of the root, bending it down into the soil. You can't see your root. If it's drying out at the tip, you won't notice it because it's in a straw. You could use a clear straw, I guess, but it's still harder to see it. So what I've been doing is kind of actually really simple. When my root grows out like this, I just get a leaf from a weed, a fairly long one, either a dandelion leaf or it can be any leaf. And I just place it on top of the root so it's touching the ground, and it just bends the root down slightly, keeps the root in the shade, and keeps a little bit of humidity in it, so the root just kind of grows down alongside the inside of the leaf and into the ground. And you get a pretty nice angle, and it doesn't damage the leaf or the root. And you can also just lift the leaf off and inspect it. So it works pretty good. So the myths of, they're not myths, but you know, being pot bound, if your pot is just full of roots, the same thing's going to happen, is that your tree's going to dry out quickly. When a pot's full of roots, there's very little places for soil or for water. It has to just go between the roots. If you have a root-bound tree, there's nowhere for water to go. It just sort of wets the roots and runs out the bottom drainage hole. So it does the same thing. It dries the pot out quickly by mid-afternoon. So that's one of the reasons a pot-bound tree grows aerial roots more easily than a tree that's just been freshly planted and has lots of room for roots to grow. Now, this isn't always the case. My tree here is not pot-bound. It was just root pruned in spring, about a month and a half ago. But it's a similar thing. Even though it's not pot-bound, these feeder roots after the root pruning have grown everywhere in the pot. So even though it's not pot bound, the roots have filled the container. So, and it happened fairly quickly. If you have the right conditions, you can almost watch the roots grow daily. They'll grow this far a day. And same with the aerial roots. Once they start growing, you'll get quite a few centimeters of growth per day when conditions are correct. One thing I've noticed with aerial roots is, let's go back to our trunk here. If they do dry out, say you go to the beach for the day or something, you can't mist it, they will live for quite a few days. What happens is they start out white in color. White, there. If they don't get enough humidity, they'll turn brown. And if they still don't get enough humidity, they'll die. But just because they turn brown doesn't mean the root's dead. If you keep misting it, then you'll find that the root tip will die, but it'll then sprout further roots coming out of it, which can actually be what you want. So rather than have one aerial root come down from your tree like this into the soil, you can have multiple ones. And it looks more like a tree would do in nature. Usually roots on a full-size ficus tree has all these braided roots coming down, not just one root going down into the soil. So. And if we take an ideal case, you'll see some ficus trees with it's almost like a buttress or a fin coming out of it, where it's not just a root, it's like a flat plane. Looks like the fins on a rocket ship almost, and they buttress around the tree. So it's the same thing as this, is that the root starts to grow, and then it develops all these fine roots coming down from it. And as they grow, they start fusing together, and you get this buttressing. I've never seen it on a bonsai tree, but that's part of one of my goals, is to try and get that someday. So we're going to keep trying. But I think we can do it by, when this root reaches the soil, if I prune it, we should get more subdividing of the roots, and so on until we try and get this effect. In Canada here, in Ontario, we have a growing season of probably, at the most, 4 months of the 12 months of the year, where we have good conditions for growing a ficus tree. And probably only 3 of those 4 months are actually really good conditions. It gets too cool before and after, so early in June it's too cool, and late in September it gets pretty cool. So it's a short growing season, but we'll see what we can do. Is there any questions?
Well, we can do foliage, we can do the bonsai soil, we can do the
well, foliage,
feeder roots. Yeah. How do we provide the right conditions? In other words, how do you get the humidity up?
Okay. Foliage is merely there because you have to have enough foliage to dry the soil out. So if we take a plan, let's do a plan here. Shouldn't have erased that. But, okay, say I want aerial roots. And so how do I get them? Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to let your tree grow to get foliage on it. As I said, if you have a tree with 5 branches and 10 leaves, it's going to be really hard to grow it. You're not going to dry your soil out in midday. So the first thing I would do is let your tree grow. And this is the top of the tree. So no pruning, just let it grow, let it bush out. You're going to get lots of vigor in the tree. And then late spring, late spring, let's say late spring. You're going to root prune it. And the objective of this is to fill your pot with fine feeder roots, not thick, coarse roots in the soil. Fine feeder roots, so that's your goal, is to fill the pot with feeder roots. And feeder roots are just young roots that do all the work. They take in the nutrients and the moisture that feeds the tree. When a root gets thick, It's just there to anchor the tree. It doesn't take in nutrients. It's only the tips of the roots that do. Probably the last centimeter maybe does all the work to feed your tree. So you want to fill your pot with fine roots. And your goal is to get there by summer, by early summer. So once you've got lots of foliage in the top of the tree, you've filled your pot with fine feeder roots, summer's starting to come, and your tree's set up to grow aerial roots. So to get that heat and humidity, you're going to need either a greenhouse or you're going to have to use plastic bags. And the plastic bags what you can do is, if this is your tree, your pot, you can put your plastic bag around the trunk of the tree, wrap it around, and I would include a thermometer in with it. Inside the plastic bag, so from the outside you can visually see what temperature it is in the plastic bag, because you don't want to get above that 45 degrees or you're going to start killing things. So you need this plastic bag. You're going to have to mist a lot, so you're going to need to be able to open the plastic bag up. So I would use like a twist tie or something around the top of the tree so you can undo it, spray your trunk down, keep the humidity really high inside here, and you should grow aerial roots really nicely. Even in the greenhouse, it's easier because you can get in there with a spray bottle. You can tell how hot it is. You can see how dry the benches are. You know when it needs more humidity in the air. And in the greenhouse, I water everything. I water the floor, the benches with the watering can, and it's amazing. If it was dry, you go in and water all the benches and the floor, the humidity level just goes up. It's almost unbearable some days. I've taken it up to 41 degrees as being my maximum temperature in the greenhouse, and the trees don't seem to suffer at all. I just keep misting it probably 2 to 3 times in the afternoon. I'm lucky I work at home, so whenever I need a break, I just go out and mist my trees. So yeah, misting really helps in keeping the humidity levels up. Yeah, so that should pretty well guarantee you get aerial roots. There's people say you should keep them in the shade, that a clear plastic bag is no good, but it's not the case. Shade helps one thing. If your roots are in the shade and you mist them, they don't dry out very quickly. If you have full sun coming through your greenhouse or your plastic bag onto the root, it'll dry out fairly quickly. So it certainly helps to have a dark bag around your plants, but it's not a requirement. These roots get full sun all day. I mean, there is some shade from the top of the tree, but most of the day the sun's shining straight on the trunk there, and the roots are growing out of it. So it's not a requirement that you have to have darkness for roots to grow. You just have to have humidity. Any other questions?
Could you put a pop bottle and do what we do when we air layer?
Yeah, that would be my only concern. There is a in one of the bonsai forums, there's a discussion on growing aerial roots. And there's a fellow in, it's either Finland or Iceland, that what he does is he actually will cut a section out of his bark, and he puts cut paste over it. And then with the heat and humidity, they start to grow out of the cut paste. So it's similar to an air layer. And it probably will it'll probably speed up the process of developing roots along your trunk if you do scar it like that. It's nice to get them without scarring the trunk, if you can do it. I mean, you certainly know your conditions are right if they're just sprouting out of the trunk. But this works quite well. That's another method that you can, you know, even on roots, you can cut a ring off around the roots and put a bag over it, and you'll probably get a lot of roots coming down from your thing, or from your cut point. So yeah, any of those methods would work, but you know, the main thing is to get your tree set up that it wants more roots. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, I
Thank
think
you, Nigel.
that's it. Thanks for watching.